happy Sunday to one and all. Happy spring ahead. I woke up this morning, it was pitch dark, and the phone said 6:20, and I had a couple of seconds of utter confusion before the light bulb finally went off, and I realized, oh, we have sprung ahead. Doesn't really feel like it. It's warm today, relatively speaking, but the usual miserable March day where it's drizzling and windy, and it is just not a great weather day. Stop me if you heard this before. But today is a movie anniversary, and I didn't just want to talk about this particular film, which I consider myself a fan of, perhaps not as big a fan as many people of my generation, but more a sense of nostalgia for times and places and spaces, and how movies can kind of trigger feelings of nostalgia, even if, we're being honest, the days that we are nostalgic for may have actually sucked, but somehow we still feel a pull and want to revisit them. You know, if we could reboot The Matrix, we'd like to see, well, what would it be like? So 35 years ago today, on March 8th, 1991, Mario Van Peebles' critically acclaimed, a modest box office hit, New Jack City, opened in theaters. And New Jack City is a film that I did not see in theaters. I was 17 at the time. I went to the movies occasionally, but not as much as you would probably expect from someone who already had the trappings of a film geek. I had purchased a number of books on movies, culture, history, and for somebody who was all but flunking out of high school in 11th grade, I had the appearance of a smart person. I had the presentation of somebody who knew what he was talking about. I mean, you could make a joke which might not be a joke. I still have the appearance of somebody who knows what he's talking about, whether or not he actually does. But New Jack City is a film about the drug trade in New York City, and I don't know that it was necessarily based on anyone in particular, but it's the kind of story that, on a lesser scale for sure, happened then and then as time went forward. But it's an interesting movie in that one of the co-stars and the filmmaker is Mario Van Peebles. Now, at the time that New Jack City came out, and I rented it on home video, early summer of 1991, VHS, I was a fan of Mario Van Peebles from Clint Eastwood's Heartbreak Ridge, in which, it must be said, he gives it just a spectacular supporting performance. He almost steals the movie from Clint, and it's certainly a top-level Clint Eastwood performance from his later era, which I would chart from the time he was mayor, which is now 40 years when this film came out, Heartbreak Ridge. It's a terrific performance from Clint, but Mario Van Peebles threatens to steal the movie. And in Clint's entire career, the closest anyone ever comes to stealing a movie from him, well, there's two. Jeff Bridges in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Many people would argue Clint actually recedes in that movie and allows Jeff to steal the movie. That's different, because he saw that he was working with this kid, a live wire, and he kind of lets Jeff Bridges as Lightfoot run the show. In The Line of Fire, there's a little bit of the same thing where Clint seems to perceive that John Malkovich is so dynamic that he doesn't give as broad of a performance, particularly in the scenes in which they interact. He's letting his co-star carry the show. And it shows a certain maturity in Clint that he didn't always have to be the alpha on screen 100% of the time. But Mario Van Peebles in Heartbreak Ridge is such a galvanizing force that you think of him as much as you think of Clint Eastwood. So I knew him as an actor. He had a TV show on NBC not long after Heartbreak Ridge, which the network promoted the hell out of, hoping that it was going to become a mainstay on I think it may have been their Tuesday night lineup. I'm not sure. But he had a show called Sunny Spoon, a kind of comedy drama action where he plays a private investigator, and the show I thought it was entertaining. I watched it, but not enough people tuned in, and the show fizzled out, was canceled. I don't think it lasted past a season. It may have had a second season, but I don't think it completed more than one full season. So Mario Van Peebles, when I was watching the previews for New Jack City, now I considered myself a fan of Wesley Snipes because he had been in Major League. At this point in time, I had not seen Spike Lee's Mo Better Blues, which I believe was his first collaboration with Denzel, and first collaboration with Wesley. I think, Mo Better Blues was 1990. I want to say that Spike Lee on his social media made some kind of a mention of it celebrating or going to celebrate 36th anniversary. Now, Spike doesn't necessarily seem like a guy who would be into the movie anniversary things, but he actually is. He likes to take note of certain historical markers, sometimes for other filmmakers like Francis Coppola, who he considers a friend. But I was a fan of Wesley Snipes from Major League. So I saw the previews for New Jack City. I was into seeing it, and I had heard of Chris Rock. I saw that he had a supporting role, Judd Nelson, of course, The Breakfast Club, but I didn't end up seeing it in theaters. And when I rented it, I was surprised to find that Mario Van Peebles directed the movie. And when I mentioned the history and how I considered myself somebody who was into the history, not just was this movie good, was this bad, I didn't know that Mario Van Peebles' father was a key figure in American independent film. I just didn't know that. I had never heard of Melvin Van Peebles, and that's on me. That's embarrassing, but it's true. You know, I'll fall on my sword. So when I found out that Mario directed New Jack City, and I watched the film and I liked it. I was very impressed. I would have, the 17-year-old me would have given it between 3 and 3.5 stars. And then I did some more reading and realized who his father was. And it just was not as easy to find stuff out in 1991 as it would be in the internet era. Because nowadays, if somebody only knows Mario Van Peebles from, that's the name of the guy who directed New Jack City, because there are a lot of movie reactors who have reacted to this film that were not familiar with Mario Van Peebles at all as an actor or as a filmmaker. And if they Google it, they say, no, wait a minute. So his father, Melvin Van Peebles, he did Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song in the early 70s. And that was it. That was an enormous, a touchstone, a lightning rod moment in independent film and in African-American film. Like these things all tie together. So there's more than just the movie New Jack City. There is the historical import of Mario getting to direct a studio feature. And there is a book that came out in the early 1990s, just after New Jack City and after I saw the film. It came out, I want to say, 1993-ish. And the book was called Alternate Oscars. And it's written by somebody who was known to me named Danny Peary. I think he pronounces it Perry, but it's Peary. He had written extensively about cult movies, and he wrote 3 books. Well, there was Cult Movies 2, and Cult Movies 3. And Danny Peary, in those books, in Cult Movies 3, he mentioned films that I would later become enormous fans of, such as Blue Velvet, such as Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. But Danny Peary also wrote a book called Alternate Oscars. And now, with the internet, we got Movie Review Man, that guy with the beard and everything, he's great. You have people doing these kinds of things, one TikTok video after another. Who should have won the Oscar this year? Who should have won the Oscar that year? But before there was a social media, you had the occasional magazine article. You had people like me bantering at the gym. And you had someone like Danny Peary, a film historian who wrote extensively on science fiction and cult movies, writes a book called Alternate Oscars. And I'm not going to go through all of the, points of contention, but I will point out that he would have rather Clint Eastwood won Best Actor for Dirty Harry than Gene Hackman. He would have rather Malcolm McDowell for A Clockwork Orange and Clint for Dirty Harry. He thought that Clint's performance, he would have argued it was the single best performance of Clint's career up to that point, early 90s. Now, Anthony Hopkins, Sir Tony himself, won the Best Actor Oscar for films released in 1991. I would argue that was Warren Beatty's Oscar. I believe that Warren Beatty and Bugsy gave the best leading performance in a movie that year. That is not to say that Sir Tony does not fucking crush it as Hannibal Lecter, because he does. But it's a supporting performance. Hannibal Lecter is not a lead character, it is a supporting role, but he won for lead actor. In Alternate Oscars, I'm pretty sure that Danny Peary, because what he did was, he said who I think should win the Oscar, or should have won the Oscar for Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Director, whatever. But then he had something called award-worthy runners-up, and that's where you saw names like Clint Eastwood and Malcolm McDowell in 1971 in lieu of Gene Hackman. Well, I think that he had Warren Beatty and Anthony Hopkins as award-worthy. He wasn't saying that Anthony Hopkins was not worthy of the award, but he picked Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes' turn in New Jack City as Nino Brown, the head, we think, the drug lord, the kingpin, we think, of the Cash Money brothers in Harlem. He believed that Wesley Snipes' performance, although it was critically praised, he thought that critics still did not give it its due, and that it was the best performance any actor gave in 1991, including Sir Tony and the great Warren Beatty. I was a little surprised when I read that, but if you go back, if you haven't seen New Jack City at all, or if you haven't seen it in a while, Wesley's performance, to me, it appears as if it's touched by genius. And there are certain actors in certain roles and in the era of the 90s where it just feels like an alchemy and some kind of a serendipity where you say, this is so good it almost doesn't make sense. And I would say Kevin Kline's dual role, D-U-A-L, in the movie Dave is another one. But Wesley Snipes in New Jack City is a live wire of energy, of angst, of what am I doing here? Is this all there is? And there are certainly elements of Scarface, but I got to be honest, I love Brian De Palma. I love Al Pacino. Scarface to me is the most overrated movie of the decade. I would barely give it a thumbs up. I love Pacino with the accent and what we gonna talk about and all this stuff. She will love again. She don't need no man. I think the movie is just not good. But the comparison, yeah, drug kingpin versus we think drug kingpin, but it's the idea that you can succeed beyond your imagination. You can live the life you imagined, and that might be a drug kingpin. But you're still going to be left with existential questions. Is this all there is? Is this all I am? Is this all I could ever be? And something that I missed the first time watching this movie, because to me, Nino Brown just came across as a troll, and he was just an awful guy. You know, there was no real inner conflict, and I thought there's a famous scene where he cries. It felt like crocodile tears, but there is something in the performance that didn't hit for me the first time that now resonates. And, you know, he probably should have gotten a Best Actor nomination, especially given the fact that this movie got great reviews. This film was, I believe it's in the 80s on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's what I wanted to talk about as far as New Jack City, a movie that many Gen Xers embraced at the time. I was a fan, but then I look back on it now, I'm an even bigger fan than I was back in the day. Wesley's performance, Mario's really smooth direction, Judd Nelson and Ice-T, you know, really solid in key supporting roles very early in Ice-T's career, but later the same year, he worked with Denzel in the movie Ricochet, featuring a bonkers performance from John Lithgow. I mean, cuckoo bananas bonkers from John Lithgow and Ricochet. Man, was he chewing it up. Cliffhanger, he chews it up even more with that accent. You want to kill me, don't you, Travers? We'll take a number and get in line. Just great stuff. So that's what I have to say about New Jack City. And the other thing with that movie that resonates with me, the use of New York City locations. And I mentioned how we can feel pangs of nostalgia even if we were not happy during the time period in which this particular place and space and time is expressed, is shown to us. And I did work in the city part-time in 1991, and I was not having a good time in life at all, but seeing the shots of the New York City skyline and the use of some of the real locations like a bridge, we won't say which bridge, and the way the film wraps up with a pull away from where you pull away from Battery Park and you see the World Financial Center and those two magnificent structures, it's hard not to tear up. And when I think of that, I ponder other movies of the decade which take great or make great use of New York City locations. In some cases, the city feels like a character itself. And, I should have started with this. I worked for my father's accounting firm summers and then often on off days. But then when I went to New York University, circa 94, 5, and 6, I worked for him part-time. I was a steady presence in the city, even on days where I didn't have school. So movies of the 90s, in addition to New Jack City, in which it feels like the city is another character. Polarizing figure though he may be, Woody Allen's Manhattan Murder Mystery. That makes as good a use of New York locations as any film I've ever seen, and I've seen plenty. But the way that it moves through space, and that film opens with a helicopter shot, New York City at night, circa 1991-92, because that film came out summer 93. But when you have a helicopter shot, it could have been shot at any time. It didn't even have to be shot for Manhattan Murder Mystery. It could have been from some other movie that ended up not getting used, in a manner of Stanley Kubrick loaning footage that he didn't use from The Shining to Ridley Scott to use in Blade Runner. There's some great trivia. A lot of you know that, so I don't want to make you think that none of you have any idea what I just said. But Manhattan Murder Mystery opens with a helicopter shot over Manhattan and closes on Penn Station and Madison Square Garden. And then we go in and we see that there is a New York Rangers game going on. That is magnificent. Other films of the decade that really take advantage of the city in a grittier, dirtier way. Rounders from 1998, a lot of amazing camera work in the city. Matt Damon, that moment where he's almost telling us, I'm tempted to turn the truck around because he's just off of the Holland Tunnel. I'm tempted to turn the truck around and I could be at the Taj Mahal in less than 2 hours. That was the hotel. They used to play poker there. They don't anymore. Now it's the Hard Rock. And speaking of the Holland Tunnel, Sylvester Stallone's Daylight from 1996. It's supposed to be the Holland Tunnel, but there are a lot of awesome shots of the New York City skyline and a lot of good second unit work in New York City. It's just difficult for somebody like me to not ponder that when I see shots, because there were movies where I was in the city and I saw films being shot. I didn't actually see, director yell action. But Whoopi Goldberg did a film which was not good called Eddie, where she's a fan who becomes the coach of the Knicks. And the joke, of course, being, well, she couldn't do any worse than who they were hiring. I think Pat Riley had already left at that point. I remember also seeing the movie called The Devil's Own, the Alan Pakula film, which should have been better than it was. It was Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford. Man, what a great cast. But they didn't really have as much of a locked-in script as they should have. But there were a couple of weeks where in and around New York University, Lower Manhattan, 721 Broadway, the Tisch School of the Arts, there were trucks and catering, like facilities, or what looked like mobile catering facilities, and actor trailers, although they weren't named, for the movie The Devil's Own. And I just thought that was just so great. Every once in a while, you'd see an actor walking around. I remember almost running over, I wish, Cameron Diaz in Lower Manhattan circa 1995. It's always jarring when you see a celebrity, or my experience of it was always jarring to see a celebrity, in real life. It's different now with the social media era because everybody feels like they're your friend, and there are plenty of celebrities who interact with fans. Only if they're comfortable. Somebody like Mickey Rourke, who I love, he used to have his comments on, but he was getting so many negative troll comments that at a certain point he just stopped allowing comments on any of his posts, because the guy doesn't want to fight with people. He's doing his thing. He's working. He's trying to make money. He was on Celebrity Big Brother, controversially. You don't need to get into back and forth with fans cursing you out and you cursing them out. Who gives a shit? It's not necessary. I'm trying to think of other films. Oh, speaking of, I mentioned it during the episode on Up in the Air with George Clooney, the movie The Peacemaker. There is an extended action sequence set in Manhattan 4 years before 9/11. You're not doing that anytime. You're not ever doing that. You're not ever making a movie where there is a nuclear device set to go off in Manhattan. You're not doing that anywhere in a contiguous or otherwise United States. But that movie has some fantastic sequences where you can see that it's shot on location. George's character, he's got the headset, and he's racing past the Hyatt Hotel, near the Daily News building and other kind of big locations. So, yeah, those were the somewhat coherent and otherwise somewhat rambling thoughts about the movie New Jack City, which celebrates its 35th anniversary, even though it's not really a celebration, and just the way that New York City was used, in my opinion, so beautifully in films, mostly the major motion pictures, and how sometimes the city does feel like a character and other times it doesn't. In New Jack City, for sure, the city is like an extra character. I'll spare you the exaggerated wrap-up, and on this spring ahead, March 8th, 2026, I hope you have a great rest of your day and don't get caught in any drenching rainstorms. Peace.